Okay, we are back with Amy Bodkin. Amy is going to talk to us about one of the classes that she's teaching over at the Charlotte Mason Co-op for this semester, and that is Jewish cultural history.
Part 2.
It's a great class. And yes, you taught it in the fall semester, and now you're continuing in the spring semester, but people can jump in. Yes,
Yes,
they
you
can
do
jump
not
in.
have to have taken part 1 to take part 2. You could take them
Yeah,
completely reversed and it would be fine.
yeah. Okay, so tell us all about it.
I am super excited about it. So first of all, the reason I decided to take it is because I think a lot of times people don't realize that, like, when we teach history, we tend to teach it from like kind of majority culture because we don't have time to teach everybody's history and everybody's perspective. We can't teach them all. And so I think that there's a lot of things that we end up missing out on because everybody has a unique perspective with a unique culture. And I think Jewish culture, especially, has a tendency to be kind of like, oh, it's just like, the regular, like, standard, like, Christian history without the New Testament. And I'm like, turns out, guys, there's 2,000 years after that. So there's a whole set of like cultural differences, holidays, food differences, and just so many differences in like historical events that shape the people that we become. And with the rise in anti Semitism in the last several years, I felt like it was really important to give people the opportunity to either learn about a culture that's not their own so that they can understand and communicate better, or to learn more about a culture that is their own, especially if they're in an area where they don't have access to a Jewish living school. I teach at our local one on Sundays, but a lot of families don't have access to that. And so it's an opportunity for them to get to be in a class where we're talking about their culture and their, like, the majority culture that we're talking about,
Well,
which
yeah,
is really fun.
so let's talk a little bit about your background and your
Yeah.
expertise in teaching this class. So tell us a little bit about why, your background in it.
Okay, so we go to a Reform temple in our area where I am one of the teachers at our School for Jewish Living. And I taught the same group of kids actually for the last 3 years. And I absolutely love it. They are so fun. But I don't often get to do that in homeschool settings. And that's what I do in my day job. So I thought it would be really fun to be able to bring some of the things that I bring to Jewish cultural history when I'm teaching at school online. But additionally, I'm also one of the creators at Ani Va'ami, which is the first Jewish homeschool curriculum ever. And it was a joint effort by Orthodox, conservative, and Reform Jews. And you have no earthly idea what a challenge that was until you attempt to do it. But all of the ladies in that group felt that it was something that was worth putting the effort into. And we've all made compromises here and there, but I am a lot more fluent than I was when I first got started in some of the diversity that exists within Jewish culture and history. So I consider that to be a bit of a bonus, is that I've had that experience of working with so many different people from so many different lived experiences of Jewish cultural history.
Yeah, and Anive Ami, that's also from a Charlotte Mason perspective as well,
Yes,
correct?
it is.
Yes.
It means I and my people.
Hmm.
And we worked really hard to keep a Charlotte Mason perspective. It is exceedingly difficult when your culture is different from the culture Charlotte Mason was living in. We have a lot longer history. That's a big one. That makes a big difference. So there's a lot of differences like that. Um, this particular class, we have chosen to approach Jewish history cyclically because Jewish history is not very linear. It tends to go in cycles. It started out as a very agrarian society, and all of the holidays are heavily linked to natural
To
events.
nature. Yeah, to nature.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. And actually, today is Tu B'Shavat, New Year
Yes.
for trees. We like New Year's so much, we have four of them in a year, and one of them's just for trees.
I know, I love it. It's the birthday of the trees.
Yes, yes. So yeah, you'll learn all kinds of interesting little things like that in this class about different holidays, how those
Yeah.
times in the year have been different at different times in history and different locations, because Jewish culture has been through a 2,000-year diaspora. So that's a long time to not have a home country, which means that you get all kinds of traditions all over the world, and they vary quite widely. So, uh,
They even vary within the United States. Like if you go to a different region and different synagogue, it's
yes.
different. Yeah, it's different. But
Totally.
yeah,
And also, last semester, I learned something I didn't know. I learned that the Southern tradition for having black eyed peas for New Year's came from Sephardic Jews coming here from Spain and Portugal. It was traditional
so
on Rosh
interesting.
Hashanah, one of the New Year's, not in January,
Yeah.
to have black eyed peas as kind of like a sign of good luck for a better year. And so they brought that tradition, and it has become part of Southern custom.
Yeah, so interesting. Um, yeah, so in the fall, like you said, you covered like Rosh Hashanah and
Yes.
Sukkot and
Hanukkah.
yeah, great
Mhm.
stuff. And then so in the spring, you're actually starting with Tu B'Shavat, right? That's
That's
your
right.
first class
Yes,
next week, or it's
that's
next
right.
week.
We'll
I'm
be a little bit late, but it was the best we could do.
losing my microphone here. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Um, yeah, and then obviously we've got um, Passover and
Purim?
Purim and Israeli Independence
Oh,
Day
yeah.
and Jews in Science.
Oh,
Great topic.
yes.
You have some great topics here. Yeah.
Oh, and
So,
also my favorite that I'm super excited about, Jews and superheroes.
oh, I see it now. Yes, March ninth,
Yes,
that class.
yes.
Golos and
Turns out
superheroes. Great.
many superheroes came from Jews. I mean, Stan Lee's Jewish and he created
Yes.
a whole bunch, but there's a whole lot of other ones too.
There's a lot of cultural background that goes into creating the some of the superheroes and comics that we know of today.
Well, and not to steal too much thunder from my class, but I mean, when is it that we need superheroes the most? It's when life is hard.
Yeah,
And Jews have definitely had a lot of life is hard moments throughout
true,
history.
true.
And so, yeah, superheroes can be very important. And it's something that we as Americans and also in other countries too. But I mean, there have been a lot of great superheroes that have come out of America.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
love a good superhero story.
Um, okay, so tell us a little info about your class, like all ages, how much is it?
I think it's 75 for the family.
Yep.
And it's also for any age that wants to participate. Now, I will say that during the class, I tend to do a fair amount of talking. I include videos and things like that, and I'll ask questions. But if you've got a younger child that kind of loses interest, that's fine. Because what I do at the end of each class is I send you out a long list of things you can do in your home with your family. So even if they don't want to be there for the call and you want to be there for the call, then that's fine. And then you can introduce them to some great picture books, some videos, recipes, all kinds of different things. So,
Yeah, I love all the stuff that you include in what we call the LMS, the Learning Management System over at a Charlotte Mason Plenary, because when people sign up for a class, they get enrolled into the LMS, and then they can access the learning management system for their
Mhm.
class that has the recording of the class. So if they miss the class, if they miss the live one, they can always watch the recording. But then it has all the extra stuff that the teachers put in there. Like you said, links to books, links to recipes, videos to watch about,
Mhm.
you know, the particular holiday, Tu B'Shavat or whatever.
Mhm.
It's really, really great stuff.
Yeah.
And the families have access to that when they sign up for the class. So,
Yeah, and you're getting
um,
it from, like, different parts of history too. Like, when we did Rosh Hashanah, we had a book that took place in Portugal during the Middle Ages. But we'd also have books that took place in other places at other points in time. But Jewish history, it goes round and round. Like, it's not linear. It's cyclic. So yes, there's that aspect. Um, and also, I make sure I include a wide range of further options. So I'll have picture books recommended for younger children, but I'll also, and also adults, let's be honest, they're great picture books. But I'll also recommend some more advanced chapter books that are not appropriate for some of the younger students in the class.
yeah, yeah,
So I try to include a range.
yeah. And then also, the class registration fee is per family,
Yes.
not per student. So the whole family can participate. And like you
Mhm.
said, you have littles all the way up to,
50
grandparents. Yeah,
grandparents. Absolutely. Yeah.
that
I've
are
definitely had people
participating.
older than 50 take my classes.
Love it. So it's for the
Yeah.
whole family.
Yeah, and
Because we
actually, if
want,
you wanna take it as an adult, you can take it as an adult. I've had one student since last semester who's, just an adult taking it, doesn't have any children, doesn't homeschool even.
love
So,
it. Yes, because it's broadening our horizons,
yeah.
right? It's looking at a different culture through that own culture's lens, not
Mhm.
necessarily, the lens that you come from, but through that culture's lens. And that can really open up um, growth and learning and thinking about things from different perspectives. So,
And it's helping you learn what's beautiful about another culture. Um, and
I
I
love
got a
that.
lot of the ideas for doing this class from Amber O'Neill Johnston, who
I was
wrote A
just
Place
about to
to Belong.
mention, yeah,
Yeah, and
I
I
was just about to
talked to
mention
her
Amber.
before creating this class, and I keep telling her, I'm like, "Amber, you need to do one on, like, African American history and culture, because my kids need to take that class, and I'm not teaching it."
Yeah. Well, and the beauty is that the teacher is from that cultural background. That's so important. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, yes, we appreciate you so much teaching this class. And I know that all your students and families from last semester are looking forward to this semester. And like we said at the beginning of this little video, that you can jump in. It's okay if you didn't take the fall semester, you can jump in now and take the fall semester later if you want as a
Yeah,
recorded class. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, and
All
there
right.
are so many great resources in both of those classes of ways to dig and go further, and it's such an important thing to do to you need mirrors in your home, as Amber likes to say, to reflect your own culture so that you can see what's beautiful about yourself. But it's also important to have windows into other cultures where you can see what's beautiful about that culture. And I had so many students this last semester make so many fascinating connections, things that I didn't even fully expect. I'm like, oh, we're going there. One other thing I should note about this class, though, is that I usually dismiss younger students a few minutes early because Jewish history does have difficult topics throughout its history. It's not just like the Holocaust. There's
Right.
it's a pattern.
Right.
And because of that, I dismiss younger students a few minutes early so that we can address any of those questions that they have or any of the more difficult topics that we don't really want to cover with children when they're young, if we can avoid it,
Right.
because we don't want to traumatize or scare a child. That's not our goal. Um, and we did have some interesting discussions, and a lot of times those discussions are kind of led by the questions that the students have. We ended up discussing um, things that you might find in literature, characters that were created that were meant to portray Jews in a negative light. For example, vampires and dwarves. Both of those in literature usually are supposed to be somewhat representative of a Jewish character. So it's fascinating. We do dig into some of those deeper topics, but only for the students that are ready for those more difficult topics. So sometimes all the kids will leave and it'll just be the moms, and that's okay.
Yeah, and like you said, the end of the class time is reserved for those older students and for the parents to ask those questions and to learn topics that, like you said, might be a little traumatic for the younger kids because younger kids are just not ready to learn that yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And it's important. Like it really increases your literacy skills when it comes to learning about literature and other things.
And your observation skills.
Oh, yes.
Noticing it in society at large and things like that. Yeah. Very
You
important.
have to have a certain amount of cultural fluency to pick up on certain kinds of things. So this is kind of a history class focused on cultural fluency.
Let's see. We've got a comment. Hold on.
Oh.
Okay, so she says, I lived in Israel for over a year, and while I enjoyed learning about the culture, I wish I had got to learn more. And while we are not Jewish, I want my son, who was born there, nice, to know about the culture and history.
That's awesome.
Fabulous.
Perfect
Fabulous.
Student to have in class. And that's why I designed the class the way that I do, because I really feel like this shouldn't be a class for just Jews. It shouldn't be a class for just non-Jews. It needs to be a class where we can kind of celebrate and learn together. And I mean, people have all kinds of interesting relationships with the land of Israel because it's a complicated place. It's not simple. And Jewish history itself is not simple.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And we've talked about in the first part one class, we talked about where our families came from. Do we know that? How much do we know? How much are we able to know? And what cultural identities do we connect with? Those are good questions to ask yourself. And sometimes we'll connect with something that people don't expect. I love the Alvin Ailey Ballet Revelations because so he's an African American ballet choreographer, owned his own ballet company. He does some beautiful work. And I had told Amber about this because she also loves him. She's like, well, it's like a window for you and into a different culture. I'm like, you know what? Actually, in a way, it's like a mirror because I grew up in the Southeast and you never hear like gospel or anything in a ballet. And finally, I'm like, these are my people. So even though they're not my people exactly, there's a shared connection there. So kind of like our commenter was saying about their child.
Yeah, and shared connections are what helps the world be a better place.
Exactly. And that's our goal of any kind of cultural history class. It's to make the world a better place, for us to understand each other better, for us to relate and connect and find out how we have shared traditions. I had a kid in class last semester whose family is originally Polish. And we were talking about how some of the traditional foods in Jewish culture have their roots in Polish food because you had Jews who moved to Poland and you had Jews who moved to Spain. And so depending on where you were, you had different traditions, and how those traditions have diverged in some ways and are still similar in others.
Yeah, and the whole shared, going back to the shared connections thing too, that's also a theme in a Charlotte Mason education. The shared connections, right? Education is the science of relations and being able to relate. So many history and geography and foreign language and all of this is all about helping children create connections to other cultures and to appreciate the beauty of those cultures. So I appreciate you doing this class to help.
Speaking of a Charlotte Mason education,
Yes.
Each week we cover a different Jewish artist, composer, or musician, poet, and author.
Love it.
Yeah,
Yes,
so that's
it,
always interesting.
that's also all in the LMS section of the class that people
Yes.
can access. Yes,
Yeah. So you
so
get
much great
access to
stuff.
all these different ideas about like different kinds of music, different kinds of songs, different authors and different types of books, so many things. And it makes it more of a rich education, like a Charlotte Mason education is rich because we're not just learning facts, we're learning about what's beautiful, how people have chosen to connect in history and to share their stories. And so we're getting to experience that ourselves. And it's
Beautiful.
also interesting sometimes when people will go check out some of the resources. Like one of the resources I think I mentioned this last semester, I need to double check which week it was, but George Gershwin is a Jewish composer.
Yeah.
But if you go listen to the Classical Kids CD, which is it's Gershwin and the Magic Key. I don't remember. But if you go listen to it, they don't mention that he's a Jewish composer. They
Interesting.
paint him as a Russian composer. And so it's interesting sometimes when kids will go check out a resource and they go, "Hey, I know that. And he's Jewish. He's from Russia, but he's Jewish." And we'll talk about how, well, yes, may have come from Russia, but that didn't make you a Russian citizen. And so because of that, your identification would have said Jewish, not Russian.
Very
So
true. Very
those
true.
kinds of interesting conversations we get to have with some of the older students, that makes it really fascinating. But the younger ones have such a good time because I do use songs and videos and read picture books and things like that, so that they can connect with what we're talking about and get to see what's beautiful. That's the whole point of the first 45 minutes. What's beautiful?
Yeah. Love it. Okay. I don't think we have any other questions or comments. So is there anything else we need people to know before we wrap it up?
This class is for you. And I am super excited to share this with you guys. Um, my son actually experienced a child probably misinformed because of YouTube. Let's be honest. Lots of kids say things they hear on YouTube. Um, and it was very offensive. Like he was talking about celebrating Hanukkah, and the kid said, "I celebrate the Holocaust." It was extremely offensive, and he didn't mean it. His parents probably were horrified when they found out. But the thing is that this kind of thing is happening. It's happening on YouTube. Kids are picking it up. They're hearing about this kind of stuff. Jewish culture is beautiful, but when we highlight minority cultures, we highlight the big negatives.
That is very true.
Um,
And that is something that Amber talks about too.
yes.
That, we only teach kids about slavery and we don't teach them
Yep.
about the beautiful things of
Mhm.
African American culture. And
Yeah.
so same with kids learning about only the Holocaust, but not what's beautiful about the Jewish culture. Yes.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, it's important to cover the negatives because we don't wanna ignore them completely. But
Right.
at the same time, when we cover mostly the negatives, we tend to paint people as victims.
Yeah.
And when we see someone as a victim, we're not able to see them on an eye-to-eye level. And I talk about this a lot with the work that I do with special needs families. We have to see people eye to eye because otherwise we're elevating them on a pedestal that's too high for us to reach, or we're trampling them beneath our feet. And that is what this is all about. It is about learning to have eye to eye relationships with us, regardless of our background.
Right. And circling back to Charlotte Mason's very first principle that children are born persons, that
Mhm.
everybody, no matter their background or religion or educational
Yes.
circumstance, that everybody deserves respect and dignity.
Yes.
So,
And on that note, I should also mention that it is not a religious class. I'm not trying to proselytize all of the children. um, you know, Judaism is tied to being Jewish. Not all Jews are religious, but
that's true.
Judaism by nature is tied to being Jewish. And so, yes, there will be things mentioned about that, but it's covered in a very respectful way of respecting traditions, both Jewish traditions and also the fact that not everybody in that class has the same traditions. What's really been fun is when kids make connections between their own religious traditions and Jewish traditions and go, oh, we do something kind of similar. I'm
Yeah.
like, well, see, that's something that's kind of cool. You get to have a sensory experience in the way you pray too. So,
Love it. Okay. Thank you so much, Amy. And y'all go sign up for Jewish Cultural History because it's a fabulous, fabulous class and y'all are going to love it.
absolutely.
Starts next week.
Yes,
So,
next week on Thursday.
yeah,
So go
February
sign up
16th.
now.
Yes, sign up now. All right. Thank you, Amy. We
You're
appreciate it.
welcome.